are you ready? Please welcome to the lectern the global evangelist for Inspera, that's Ishan Kolhatkar.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'll say that even though it's not quite midday. I live in many time zones. I gave up my office a very long time ago so that I could spend my time coming to conferences like this and talking to you. I'm going to talk to you briefly today about the future of assessment. It's a grave and weighty topic and not one that we can necessarily do justice to in half an hour, but there is plenty for us to think about. Now, I went to one of those really strict schools where you were pretty much asked, who are you and why are you here when you entered a room? So I like to begin my talks at conferences in the same way. A little bit of context, because they're important. Firstly, I'm from Inspera. We're a digital assessment platform. We do assessment, proctoring, similarity. If you want to find out more, it's not through this talk. Please go to the eGrowth stand. We'll be delighted to talk to you and have talked to many of you. On the screen is some of the universities that we work with around the globe, including a number here in South Africa. So if you want to talk about the product, come see us afterwards. That's fine. But who am I? Who am I to come and talk to you about the future of assessment? Well, in summary, this is who I am. I started my life as a barrister. I wore that ridiculous wig every day for about a decade. If you're wondering, let me answer all the questions that you have. Yes, it's made out of horsehair. Yes, it's ridiculously expensive. Yes, it's itchy. And yes, the novelty wears off in the first week. After that, it's really not very pleasant, okay? Along with that big, heavy gown that you have to wear. And yes, it's cold in the UK. But in the summer, it gets quite warm, and there's no air conditioning in the UK. So you get really quite hot. I don't miss it at all. But I started my life as a lawyer. The QR code there is to my LinkedIn profile. If you're bored over lunch, you want to read a bit more about me, right? In the middle, after being a lawyer for 10 years, I thought, I want to do something different, and I became an educator. Now, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, I would like to remind you, I did smile some days when I was a lecturer. We just captured one where I wasn't. I really enjoyed it. I realized two things about being an educator. Number one, I had a little bit more patience than I thought I had. But number two, I truly understood my subject by teaching it. And I hope that that's something that resonates with the educators in the room. I actually feel better about my knowledge and my skills from being able to teach it and then seeing what happens thereafter. I taught for about 12 years, and about 3 weeks ago, I took my eldest child to university. They've just done their A-levels in the UK. They're off to the University of Manchester. I went up there. That's a day that made me and his mum feel very old. But what made me feel even older is on the very same day, one of my students, because I taught on the bar exams, one of my students who went back to Trinidad and Tobago after doing the bar exams with me became a judge on the same day. So when you've taught someone who's now a judge, you feel really quite old. So I taught. I still do a little bit of teaching on the side when I have time. But thereafter, as part of my teaching, I implemented digital assessment across an entire university. It took me about 18 months. COVID helped me at the end. I didn't cause COVID, but it helped me at the end. And then I joined Inspera. And so now I spend most of my time doing what's at the end of that, which is this, speaking to people. And I enjoy the time I have speaking to educators, academic professionals, all of those involved in the learning, teaching, and assessment of the future of all of our countries. So I thought, I know I've got a number of educators in the audience. What do I actually want from this? Well, I have some presentation outcomes for you. They're like learning outcomes, but I'm not going to assess you at the end. You're going to assess yourself. It's some self-assessment that will go on. What do I really want from this? In the time that I have, I'm going to put some propositions up on the screen, and I want you to take away what I've said, ideally, but I want you to be having these conversations in your universities. Why? Sure, I would like you to digitize your assessment and better digitize your assessment and further digitize your assessment. But ultimately, I also want you to run better assessments for your students. So, proposition number one, the era of paper under glass is over. Paper under glass is this idea that it was, I suppose, slightly propagated by COVID, but this idea that what we do is, when we want to digitize something, we just take the paper and put it on screen. Right? It's very familiar, it's very quick, and it can be effective very short term. But I'll tell you, the thing that comes with it is we keep all of our paper policies when we digitize. We don't actually think to ourselves, what can I do in a digital world? We think, okay, traditionally people schlepped all the way to an exam hall, so I've got to think about that. Then they went in, they put their bag somewhere, they sat down, they did their exam, they read the paper. I couldn't put a video on paper. I couldn't put some audio on paper. It was difficult to give them choice on questions. We did it, but it meant that you had to write in different books. And I then had to separate those books and give them to different people. And when we just put paper under glass, we end up not just digitizing our exam paper by just putting it on screen, but we lift up our policies that exist and move them into a digital world. Right? Byron from Egrowth used a phrase this morning, which I'm mercilessly stealing, but I'm attributing it to him, so it's not plagiarism, right? Which is that we use analog thinking in a digital world. We do. Paper under glass does that for us. So when you're thinking about how you either digitize, if you're just paper-based now, or how you better digitize if you're digitized already, this is the proposition I want you to think about. It's not just the exam paper going on screen. It's everything that comes with it. And it's that rethinking of what I can do in a digital world. The second proposition, which comes with a QR code to a white paper that I wrote, please read it. It took me a long time to write, but you can scan and you can read that in your own time, is that pedagogy comes before technology in order to get real digital transformation. Maybe the antithesis of paper under glass is I've bought this shiny new toy, this new bit of digital tech that I can use. I'm going to start there and run to it. I did an A-level in computer science. I still use this phrase from my teacher today. We had to do a year-long project in that 2 years of A-levels where you had to design a computer system, code it, and then document it. And his advice to us on the very first day of the project was, don't run to the computer. Now, I should point out, we had such a small computer room, I'm not sure there was any space for anyone to do any running, but I took the metaphor of what he was saying as being more important. If we think, I've got some new shiny digital kit, I'll just go into that, and then I'll re-engineer it backwards to what I want to teach or assess or get students to do, we make the mistake the other way. What we end up doing is just putting the tech first. Now, I don't think anyone in this room would consciously do that. I don't think anyone is putting consciously their technology first. But subconsciously, much like digitizing the exam paper by just putting it on screen, it's way too easy to do. So what I've put in the white paper for sort of broader reading for you is some steps to consider in this journey of not thinking, okay, what we need is a whole project on changing our assessment policy and our AI policy and this policy, and then we'll get to the tech. Actually about the two things together. The most successful projects in any digital transformation involve all of the stakeholders. We know this as a self-evident truth. But the bit to think about in particular here when it comes to assessment is there is a really wide range of people who need to be in the room and part of that conversation, from the very techie people to the very educationally people and those in between. This is perhaps my most controversial opinion. A closed book exam should not be our default. And your response normally is, but Ishaan, I need them to know things. Okay, great. Now, I have to declare my own bias. We are, whether we think or not, we all have our own biases. I believe the trick to life is actually understanding what yours are. Mine is, I'm not very good at closed book exams. I was never good. I'm sure you've worked out in the 10 minutes I've been on stage. I am not a sit down for extended periods of time kind of person. I think and work best when I'm able to move around and talk. So I do have a bias. They don't work for me. What I want you to think about potentially, if you're an educator in this room or working with educators, is one of the reasons why I believe we still have so many closed book exams is because educators are good at them. They did them. They passed them. They became educators. And they're passing down the same legacy of, well, hey, it worked for me. I don't think it necessarily does work for the generations that we now have in higher education. Can I ask you a question, just by a show of hands very briefly? Have you ever watched a TikTok video or Instagram reel? Put your hand up. Come on, people are lying in this room. Right. Keep your hand up if you've made one. Okay, a small number of people. Now, I don't have the time to get into why, but I'm going to speculate. Some of you haven't made one because you don't think you've got content to do it. Some of you would not, as I did, stand up over here during the session yesterday and dance with the dancers. I'd like to point out, if we just briefly go back, you'll note one of the things on here, or missing from here, is dancer. I'm not a dancer. I wasn't asked, I don't know why I was asked to do it, but actually thinking about why we might not do it. At least some of you in this room would say, if they were honest, I don't know how to do it. I have no idea how to make a TikTok video or Instagram reel. Now, we in my view, overvalue the ability to write at the expense of the other ways in which people can express themselves. Right? I won't ask for a show of hands. I bet there's a number of people in this room who think, I'm fine listening to Ishaan, which I accept is not all of you. Some of you are already bugged out at that point. That's fine. But I'm fine listening, but I wouldn't want to stand here and do it. Okay? I wouldn't want to write this talk. We have different skills, and by defaulting to closed book exams because we believe this is the only way of finding out what people know, we are limiting both the scope of the students that we can well assess and our own scope to think of other ways of doing it. If we think of a default that this works because it's always worked, it really does get in the way of us actually looking at the future of assessment. In my view, the future of assessment should, at its nth level, for people really at the sort of top of the levels, if we think of the 4, 5, 6, 7, but towards the end of those levels in higher education, I believe we should be giving students learning outcomes and saying to them, you assemble what you want to give me to show me you've met the learning outcomes. Why does it have to be a closed book exam? Right? I know that dastardly topic that hits every talk these days is going to come up, and we'll get there, don't worry. But we need to make sure that we're actually thinking way wider. So what are our options? The ability to, as I say, at that nth level, say to people, just show me. Here are the learning outcomes. You do it. It has worked. When I ran the postgraduate diploma in higher education, teaching and learning at the university that I was at, for the final module, that's what we did. Now, sure, I was dealing with people who were professionals already. This wasn't their first degree that they were doing, but saying to them, this is what we're working towards. You put together a portfolio to show me you've hit those learning outcomes. That's not going to work for everybody. But giving people options of how they would like to be assessed at a very basic level, would you rather write an essay or would you rather do a presentation? I would, 100% of the time, rather do a presentation, which is another reminder, please read that white paper. It was a lot of work to write all those words down. I wanted to do it as a video. We didn't make that work. So let's think about giving people that flexibility and how much scaffolding that needs. It's part of the learning and teaching you're doing, but perhaps the bar that you think about, well, is operationally this is difficult. How do I do it if I've got a cohort of 500 students? Do I really want to have, okay, well, you can submit this here and you can bring this in here, and that's the drop box for option 3, and here's the actual physical box for this one. This is where actually thinking about what comes around the sides of digitizing your assessments well is the benefit that you can drive. By having your students in a single digital space where they understand how it works, where their focus is not on how do I click the buttons, what do I do here, but on just doing their best work, actually then operationalizing the idea of saying, you've got free choice, becomes so much easier. So that ultimately we can hit this. This is what I believe we're all after in terms of assessment. We want assessment to be flexible, and you decide in what context that works for you. At the top end, as I say, it's flexibility for the students to decide how they're assessed. One level down is you, the educators and professional staff, having all the right tools to put out there, if it is just one assessment for everybody, the one that fits your context. You're not buying the box and saying, what can I tip in that makes it work? You're actually saying, this is what I want to do. I have an example which as yet has not been used by anyone. It will at some point, and then I'll have to think of another one. I am, bizarrely, with this voice, I'm a big NFL fan, American football, right? I have a fancy league team, and this year I'm doing pretty well, but we'll leave that to one side, right? In America, about 4 years ago, there was a fan who ran onto the pitch, and he ran down the sideline, and he was tripped up by one of the coaches to stop him so that he could be arrested. Now, I could describe all of that. The video is way better. If we're training future lawyers, why not an assessment where we show them the clip and we say, that man has just entered your office and he wants to, because this is America now, he wants to know who he can sue and how much he's going to get. That is an authentic, practical assessment. You can't do it on paper, and it didn't take much thinking. This came from me watching an Instagram reel, obviously, because I don't do any real work. I just watch those. It's fun. I see myself as a distributor to others. So, we can think more creatively. We can embed spreadsheets into the assessments that we do. We can give students access to the tools that we let them use when they're being taught or when they learn. Right? The almost sort of taking students backwards many years by saying, in your learning and teaching environment, you can do all of these things. And these are all the exciting things I talked to you about. Now, to be assessed, what I want you to do is sit quietly in this room with a piece of paper, right? Now, again, by a show of hands, who in this room for more than an hour a week sits quietly with a piece of paper and a pen? One. Okay, there will always be, and that's fine. And I don't say this as someone who's just tech everywhere. I take my notes when I'm on calls with a paper and pen. I just like it. I prefer it. I'm not anti-paper and pen. I'm just saying let's use it in the right place. I don't think assessing students is the right place. So let's create a creative space for both our educators and our students. For educators to be able to actually come up with different ways of assessing. Right? The answers are all out there. I was recently at our UK customer event, like 30 customers in the UK, and over lunch I was talking to 5 or 6 of them and said, okay, if we say that this is Chatham House rules, I won't repeat who you are, but you give me some ideas. What are things you'd love to do when you want to assess that you can't now? And I had to stop them. We had to go on to the next session. People are filled with great ideas, contextualized to what they teach. I can give you points like adding in real-world tools that you use every day. I can say, let's show them videos. I can say, let's give people a space to do oral assessments. That's just the starting point. Your educators have ideas, and you know what? Sit them next to the ones that don't, because it becomes infectious as they start to understand what they can do. And then add in a learning technologist and a learning designer, people who don't know the cognate subject but do know what's possible. Right? I found one of the people who I thought would be most resistant to change and to digitizing their assessments, actually, within a couple of weeks was like, okay, cool. I've been in and done some stuff by myself. That was a happy moment for me. What are the other things that we need to think about? Well, have I broken this? No, I haven't. Right. Okay. Some other points that we need to be able to consider as we do this. it needs to be thoughtfully integrated into the world you're in. Please don't run to start by thinking, right, everything has to be integrated together. Everything has to have a little sticky point to somewhere else. Okay, it might be comforting to think that, but where are the real integration points? Where do people really care about things being integrated? Right? Almost all of our customers have an integration so that the grades go back somewhere. Fine, I get that. You need to output it somewhere. Right? But what are the parts of your ecosystem and your world that you need to care about? What are the bits the students need to care about? If you do want to reimagine these assessments and make them more modern, what else do they need access to? But don't just start with the big list of everything, because you're just adding time to what is already a process that I'm not going to call difficult, I'm going to call impactful. But impactful usually means it requires you to expend some energy. Don't add the bits you don't need. What you do need to think about in this reimagined world is academic integrity. Now, if we start from that point of over here, closed book exams, I'm just going to lock them in a room. That's my only way of knowing that they've acted with integrity. Phil Dawson, the academic from Deakin University in Australia, which is a good place for me to plug my podcast that I do for Inspera. And I had Phil on there. It's probably the best episode. If someone else in the room was on the podcast, I'd say it was the joint best episode. But none of you have been on yet, so I can't. But Phil talks about how validity of assessment is actually way more important than the integrity of it. And whether you're with him or not, putting in the integrity by design does not mean that we then just lock them off from everything. Right? There are things that I accept in every cognate subject. We want to know that the students know by themselves. But here I'd like you to reimagine and rethink what those things are. Are we using analog thinking in a digital world? Right? The ability to, I normally pull my phone out at this point, but I left it on the table. The ability to have the world's knowledge with no application, really, in our hands has changed how we are. You know, the lie that those, now you're all too young in this audience, but I was told, you won't have a calculator every day when you walk around. I'm like, yes, you're right, I don't have a calculator. In fact, I just have the world's knowledge in my pocket if I can just apply it in the right way. And as we know, stop watching Instagram reels. So the point here is, do we need them to have this level of knowledge? Is it important that they can recite things that we had to recite because we had no other way of doing it? My best example here comes from the world of law, what I used to teach. We still, despite England and Wales having one of the most progressive set of bar exams, where you're assessed on your advocacy, your conferencing skills, the actual skills of being a lawyer, we still have two exams, civil litigation and criminal litigation, where you must write them closed book, in silence, in an exam hall. Now, what we are saying to students is, you need to memorize the contents of these big chunky books to do this exam, to show that you know them. That is not representative of real world whatsoever. In fact, as a former lawyer, I'm going to say this. If you go to a lawyer and you have a problem, and they say, no, I'm not looking at the books, I'm just doing this from what's inside my head, run. Run really fast out of that office, because you do not want a lawyer who says, I know everything. I'm not going to look at everything. But that's how we're assessing the next generation of lawyers. We're saying to them, keep it all in your head. Just for 3 hours, then you can forget it all again. You ask me, that's a memory test. That's not a test of being a lawyer or legal knowledge. It's important that we think about accessibility by design too. Now, this has been something that people have actually warmed to very quickly. We are all warmed to, we are all in the right space of making what we do accessible. But the warming to is the link into digital assessment because, and the future of assessment, because what we have been doing for some period is students who have accessibility needs, they have been doing their exams or assessments on a computer, because that's the way of actually being able to provide them with the right environment. So where we need to think about them in particular is making sure that there is real equity in what we provide in that future of assessment. And to my mind, giving people options is an entirely tenable and credible way of doing this. I have a neurodivergent child who I can tell you is not going to be the best person at sitting in silence writing exams, just like me. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't have the knowledge, skill, and experience to do the things he's asked. He frequently just wants to do things slightly differently to the same outcome. So I think it is really important that that is part of what we're thinking about in this future. And authentic assessment. Given the time, I'm just going to get past this one because I gave you my best example with the person being tripped up. I do want to get to this, and I've put it towards the end of my presentation because I think it has become so domineering in what we talk about. Yes, we don't know quite where AI is finally going to end up. Yes, in my view, the rate of change is slowing a little bit. I know we had this idea it will be exponential. I don't see that. I think generative AI in particular is starting to slow in its capability. It's not an inevitability. There isn't a need to bake it into everything that you do. Just talking about Inspera just for 1 second, one of our important principles is that anything that we build in our platform, you have the ability to say no and turn off, whether it's at an institutional level or at an individual academic level. My view on AI, whether it's authoring questions or grading papers, is this should be entirely within the gift of the educator to decide knowledgeably if they use it or not. With AI content generation, we could all just go put into ChatGPT now, write me 10 questions about Johannesburg. We'll get 10 fairly anodyne questions. Actually, the importance here is people adding their context to it, whether it's grading, whether it is content generation. And again, if you want to read more, the second labor of love from this year was an artificial intelligence white paper. You can click the same QR code and find out more about it. We need to make sure that what we have in this future of assessment has insightful analytics. It was Terry Leahy who said that data is the new oil. Right? I'm not sure. I think insightful data is the new data. We have these big data lakes. What do they actually tell us? My 3-second pitch on data when you're thinking about it is actually start with the outcome. Do the thing that you're really good as educators. Think about learning outcomes. Think about data outcomes. Don't think about data points. Ask yourself, what do I want the data to tell me? And then get someone whose job it is to deal with data to go find that data for you. Right? If I take attendance, what do I want to find out? Is that compliance? Do I take attendance because I actually want to know if there's a correlation between attendance and attainment? If I do, then what attainment data do I want? Start with the outcomes. And it all comes down to this. We assess our students for 2 reasons, whether it's formative or summative. We've got different reasons for assessing them. I am a big personal believer that summative assessment should come with feedback that's as good as formative assessment. There's some beliefs out there that, hey, if it's a summative assessment, they're done with it. It's summative, they're done with this. I think you can feed forward into every bit of someone's lives. I believe you can actually give them really good feedback that they can use elsewhere, that they can use in the right context. So both the content and the presentation of it are massively important. The link into the future of assessment is twofold. Number one, I don't believe our needs have changed. We just need to do more and better feedback to people. But the second is, as you reimagine that future of the assessments that you do, it opens up new avenues into the feedback that you can give people. If you, and I bang on about it in the little time I have left, if you do give people more opportunities to do oral assessments, they are going to get better at presenting. And you can give them feedback on that oral assessment that they can use in the next one. Now, eventually that puts me in Africa out of a job because we like presenting and lots of people don't. But I'm fine with that. I'd be grateful if there was more people who wanted to present. So, in the time I had with you, remember, you come chat to me outside before I fly home. I want to thank you for your attention. Once again, if you want to connect with me, you can. There's my QR code to my LinkedIn profile. But thank you very much for the time and for listening.